So this is the KhoodeelaarTV Channel being broadcast online from London, UK within quotation marks. And this is part C of the Khoodeelaar campaign, KhoodeelaarTV Channel. And this is the front page of The Guardian. Now, 20 billion is more than the total annual budget of many states in the world. And anyone who invades a country with no resistance can expect to pocket or get that kind of money or currency. Nothing beyond and below an invasion can produce anything more than a few millions at the most. Now, Cameron is the criminal who was in post as the Prime Minister of the UK from May 2010 until the 2015 election. Cameron did severe damage to the Constitution. He produced the corrupt dictatorship of fixed term parliament, thus preventing democracy from working in the houses of parliament. And Cameron also introduced many new life members to the House of Peers. All of them were foisted on the so-called House of Peers in return for money and other benefits that they kind of contributed to the Conservatives as a party. So it was brazen bribery and corruption beyond anything that could be described in parliamentary language or in language that can be used on a program like this. So Cameron has been more corrupt as British Prime Minister than has been kind of observed or reported by Fleet Street. Until today, until this time, when this kind of magnitude of corruption and criminality and theft and robbery against the public funds, public resource, were involved in his heist. And there is no sign that even with this kind of disclosure, any of the laws is going to be invoked against Cameron and his theft acts, including the statutes, the acts of parliament called Theft Act each time, 1968 and 1978 main editions, main versions, if you like, or the subsequent kind of amendments. The amendments, as I said earlier, did not fundamentally alter the law on theft and fraud and so on. But whatever the actual contents of the provisions in the Theft Acts and the accompanying or the following kind of amendments does not prevent prosecuting Cameron. Plus, the comparatively flexible provisions of the common law are always around, available. Now, the fact that the Crown Prosecution Service or the police have not started proceedings in criminal law against Cameron is not a comment on the limitations of existing laws or the need for additional laws or legislation to contain and to cover the crimes that Cameron has already committed. Cameron has been the gang leader, and the other gangsters with him deserve to be prosecuted and can be prosecuted and should be prosecuted. Instead of all these completely diversionary, lying mechanism of having various inquiries launched from here, there, and everywhere, because they can be kind of ignored, these inquiries are easily issued. That serves two purposes. One is that the inquiries don't lead to prosecution or imprisonment of criminals like Cameron. And the other thing is that they divert attention away from the actual allegations and the crimes and offenses that Cameron and his likes commit and have committed. Let's see what's John Craig says in The Guardian today. So this is this piece today by the political sketch writer John Craig is giving, I think, a deserved mention to Meg Hillier. But he is giving Hillier more credit than she deserves. He says that Hillier cut to the chase, which gives credit to her beyond the actual contents and substance of her role. And he then paraphrases her, Meg Hillier. Would Greensill have been given such special treatment if it had not been recommended to Sunak, Glenn, and Scholar by Cameron? ? Here, Scholar rather gave the game away. Of course, he would always take calls from ministers he had worked with, and it was only reasonable to give preferential treatment to companies with lobbyists who were known to him. Scholar and Roxburgh had only been doing their jobs, just as Dodgy Dave had only been doing his. Well, that conclusion is actually unfairly and unjustifiably kind of made. Because Cameron's role is not as an employee or as an agent. Cameron is the gang leader. And nothing that Cameron has ever said or stated or done or implied has ever suggested that he believed that he was an ordinary member of the public. It suggested something that he thought that he was immune from accountability and that he enjoyed impunity linked with something that has not been explained. And I'm going to explain it now. Is it the rumored kind of link, alleged link with the royal family that Cameron in effect has been exploiting as well as being the former prime minister, former leader of the Conservatives? Because nothing in his words, his language, his body language, nothing suggests that he ever thought that he was accountable in the same way that ordinary people are. And I think the Fleet Street knows that there is something of an impunity that he assumes and he has been granted de facto, in effect. Although formally, officially, legally, he has no impunity, but his behavior suggests, his body language of defiance and lack of remorse suggests that he believes that he is entitled to impunity from accountability. Only the monarch can expect impunity. Nobody else. Even within the kind of constitutional settlement in this country, that is to say, recognize the monarch on condition that the monarch won't take part in, intervene in politics, and that the monarch would do the constitutional head of state things on the agreed basis that she took the advice of her ministers, the prime minister. Not that it was compulsory, but that is the constitutional settlement as far as the monarchy is concerned. In other words, it is a constitutional monarchy dependent on the agreement and the consent of parliament and the prime minister. Now, because it's not a written constitution, the British Constitution is exposed to abuse and robbery and thuggery. For example, as witnessed in the period 2018 to 2019, when Johnson kind of suspended Parliament. Now, only the monarch can suspend Parliament, not Johnson, the Prime Minister, who is only a minister of the monarch. So when Johnson lied and suspended Parliament, he lied as congenital liar that he is. He must because of his propensities inside himself, not he must because it is reasonable, constitutionally or legally, or ethically or morally, that he should tell lies, but he should tell lies as he is under prompting from within himself. That unless he lies, he can't sleep. It is that bad and that toxic and that corrosive and that persistent. So our commentary is that Fleet Street is letting him get off easily because Fleet Street, the entirety of Fleet Street, that includes all the editors and the Society of Racist Editors, lack knowledge. There is not one single member of parliament. I'm repeating this again, so it's a double repeat. There is no single member of parliament, currently member of parliament in the UK House of Commons, who knows the law, who knows the constitution, who knows the obligations that the Prime Minister of the day is under. So therefore there has been no expression of that knowledge on the part of any member of the parliament to hold the head of government accountable, hold the government accountable. So it's all a parasitical kind of arrangement. And Cameron has behaved as a parasite of the biggest, of the worst kind. A parasite, if the parasite eats up the body that it parasites on, then it no longer remains a parasite. It becomes the owner of the whole thing. So what Cameron has been doing is to eat up the body. And this analysis, I'm making the analysis, not a member of parliament, not any of the Fleet Street, not any of the mainstream broadcasters whatsoever, or anybody else anywhere in the world. So the United Kingdom has been reduced to shreds by Cameron's theft and robbery and fraud. And it will not be surprising at all if Cameron is shown as a far darker operative than he has been. He has been kindly shown to be so far. Cameron, in his kind of demand for 20 billion pounds from the Bank of England, was not behaving within any rules. He was not behaving as if he had ceased to be Prime Minister. And Cameron never let on about any of the criminality that he was doing, whenever making superficial comments on events after he left the post. But Cameron got caught about the deal with China. Now, quite apart from the deal with China and the Chinese enterprises, Cameron remained a fully paid up operative on behalf of the multi-billion pound project. So Cameron was given the impunity by Parliament, actually. And so, I mean, this series of probes and inquiries are complete jokes. He should be prosecuted. And we shall be looking more at Cameron after we diagnose the piece in the Times yesterday, or was it today, promoting the new, I think yesterday, so it was the new Master of the Rolls. Just as Polly Toynbee wrote in The Guardian, after visiting the Clerkenwell and Shoreditch County Court, she didn't say how long she stayed there, but it is supposedly she must have spent a few hours. So when she wrote that piece in the Guardian, talking about a day in the court, she did not examine and she did not actually discuss real limitation in the Constitution or in the legal bureaucracy. She wrote a matronizing piece about people experiencing evictions from their homes. And she made matronizing references to the people being evicted. And she promoted the charity shelter, and she promoted the court structure, and she showed absolute ignorance about the way the county courts operate. And she gave unconditional promotion to the concept of the licensed solicitor, licensed law trader, slot called solicitors, because she unconditionally promoted the involvement of solicitor as being equal to just representation done by the involvement of these licensed law traders called solicitors. And she left out all the details on the various stages that the county court puts the victim of the eviction application, that is the application for repossession. That is one list of Polly Toynbee's anti-litigant, the victim coverage for the shelter, for the county courts, and so on. There was nothing in Polly Toynbee's piece, that piece in The Guardian, which I think was probably written in April, a few years ago. and Politonby announced to the campaign that I lead and organize, which wrote to her emails asking for details of what she saw and asking for explanation as to why she left out most of the substance. And Politonby, for those who don't know the British kind of media, Operation Fleet Street, and the relationship between Fleet Street and the government, warmongering government, and the racist government, need to know that Politonby was one of the very rare kind of living journalists, so-called, who expressly shifted their loyalty from supporting the Lib Dems and agreeing with a lot of Labour Party-led legislation during the time or years when the Labour Party card-carrying members, Brown and Blair, were in government. So Politonby excused the flaws and the inadequacies and the lies of the legal bureaucracy. And she never, of course, she said that she didn't have the. When we asked her, when we challenged her about her stupid PR for shelter and for the solicitors and the court's bureaucracies, and she completely failed to answer the questions. And as every time we have found, whenever wrongful decision or wrong decision makers are asked to justify the wrong action, justify in the context of the law and the legal obligations they owe to the victim of the decisions, they fail to justify. And this was the case with Politonby, whom we challenged after she wrote that piece in The Guardian. But apart from Politonby's pathetic, childish excuse, she said that she didn't have the resources to do any further investigation or fuller investigation into how the housing crisis is exacerbated and made worse by the policies of the courts, the legal bureaucracy of shelter, local councils, etc. So when Cameron was in post the first time in May 2010, he was able to form the government only because the liar Nick Clegg of the Lib Dems had decided to betray a series of promises that his party made to the campaigners before the election. And Cameron saw the opportunity. So he egged Nick Clegg on for Clegg to kind of harass through the media, the Fleet Street, harass Gordon Brown for staying as a squatter. in the post of prime minister, because there were these communications. Because of the lack of absolute majority by any of the parties, that is to say the Conservatives or the Labour Party at the 2010 election, there had to be kind of deals made, alliance formed. And in the communications and the deal making terms, that exchange between the Labour Party at the time, fronted by Gordon Brown, and Sikh Clegg on the part of the Lib Dems, there was a delay that sounded like a delay of 100 years or something, but it was in fact less than a day's delay, really. But during the delay, there was constant items in the mainstream British media, including Fleet Street, where it said, the statement from Sikh Clegg described Gordon Brown as the squatter, because he was staying beyond the normally understood kind of amount of time after the election. That was Sikh Clegg being bribed and corrupted further by David Cameron. And the corruption was in the form of his being made, quote, the holder of the title of Deputy Prime Minister. Cameron never consulted him at all, but he was able to use the fickle and dishonest fellow crook Sikh Clegg. And Sikh Clegg has never recovered from that disgraceful decision he made to collude with Cameron. I mean, the side effect of that was when that deal was made, it became quite fast. It became known as a farce. And Cameron made maximum use of the capitulation and bribability and corruption of the Lib Dem cabal fronted by Sikh Clegg. So our narrative has always been consistent with the ethics, the morality, the universality, the democracy, the accountability, and the basic democratic human rights and needs of the majority of the people, vast majority of the people in this country, impacted on and affected by all the actions that Cameron has taken. And Cameron, throughout the 5 years since May 2010, Cameron, as I said, behaved even on the records as if he was impugned from accountability. I suggest that Cameron actually operated throughout the whole period as somebody who was above the reach of the law and the reach of the democracy and so on. Why do I think so? Because I have been observing and commenting on Cameron at least since 2005, if not earlier. And everything I said about Cameron has come true. Adding to that everything Dennis Skinner said in his speech on Dodgy David Cameron was called Dodgy Dave Cameron, has been correctly vindicated, debated. So when he went to the Bank of England and demanded from the finance ministry that they give billions and billions and billions of pounds of public money to this crook Greensill. He didn't think that he was doing any criminal thing, because that was part of his entitlement and that was covered by the impunity. So he must have thought that the total lifelong impunity that he was acting on, he was like exhibiting in his behavior, never would leave him the Financial Times today, this extra piece there, let me just find it. Can you believe this? We shall talk about this. There is a piece in the Financial Times. Well, there are two pieces about Asia. And one is about a big read in the section or under the title called Myanmar. And it raises the question, it's a heading with a question mark. Is Burma going to become a failed state? Now remember, you are watching the program not about Burma, but you are watching the program about the sickness of the British newspapers, collectively known as Fleet Street. And only as illustration of the contents, the sick-making contents of these Fleet Street papers, are you hearing me discuss any of the other things. For example, Cameron's Theft Act or Cameron's Serial Theft Acts and the BBC's corruption and criminality and Cameron's kind of amount that Cameron kind of demanded from the British public to give to his front organization. What I am saying is that he was not. Cameron, by all the evidence that has been published so far, was not working as an agent or as a kind of representative for the company. He was the company. He owned the main property, if you like. And he was therefore demanding, and he was also behaving like he owned the whole of the UK. I mean, how could 20 billion pounds worth of what he thought was that this would be just signed off? That he would get it without any hassle, any shrug of any kind of criticism. 20 billion pounds from the central bank of the country. I mean, it's more than all the combined amounts of the money that have or has been mentioned in all the criminal acts by lobbyists, other lobbyists combined. So what gave Cameron the confidence that he could do this and take it as far as he did do, and that he would gainfully be engaged in carrying out worldwide robbery and looting? Remember, he went to Saudi Arabia and he was with Lex Grand Seal, but regardless of his physical appearance, they're very much constantly in contact with the targets of the robbery and other acts of criminality. So when Cameron goes to Saudi Arabia, notice what he did. After Jamal Khashoggi was murdered at the instigation and order of the so-called crown prince, because the royalty is a sham, complete sham. The Saudi royalty and royal family is a complete fraud constitutionally. And in terms of the location of the two holy places, Mecca and Medina, I mean, the royal family surrounding those two places, the existence of the royal family in Saudi Arabia becomes totally anti-Islamic, because the places don't belong to any particular country or family or anything like that. It was the physical evidence that he was defiant of basic decency. The murder of Jamal Khashoggi in a foreign territory was a feature in British mainstream news every single day for several months. So when he goes to Saudi Arabia after Jamal Khashoggi murder, evidence has become published, and all the kind of informed observers had pointed unitedly, if you like, in terms of evidence. All the evidence pointed to this so-called crown prince. Months after that, Cameron goes to Saudi Arabia and shake hands. So he goes there months after the news is published throughout the world that Khashoggi, although his murder took place on the Turkish territory, he was murdered on the orders of the Saudi royal family. So Cameron should have been considering not going there, shouldn't he? No way. He didn't care. If you look at the body language of Cameron in the pictures that or the videos that must exist of his visit, you can see the undeniable evidence of contempt for the victim. There are 2 or 3 types of victims. The victims were obviously the ones that the murder of Khashoggi made kind of distraught. So those victims were being shown 2 fingers by Cameron. And the freedom of press, because Khashoggi was murdered by all the accounts by the royal family, whether it was done physically, personally by one member of the royal family or not makes no substantial difference. So Khashoggi was given the treatment by Mike. Khashoggi was given the kind of death sentence by the royal family. This was the summary of what came out after investigators, including those appointed by Rakib Tayyip, the Turkish president, came up with the strong evidence. And Khashoggi was kept alive by a program on So, what kind of person does that? He goes to Saudi Arabia without any interruption. He goes there and he goes straight into the headquarters of the person who had ordered the murder of this journalist, critical journalist. He comes back. There is no sign of any remorse. Well, he doesn't disclose that he has gone there in that role. And the details of the communications between Cameron and others in the context of his £20 billion theft act. All the facts will be summarized in our updates. But taking the reality, the truth of the lies being told by Boris Johnson and his colluders in the government in order to deflect attention from their combined corruption and criminality. Cameron has been reluctant to come out and endorse any statement upholding ethics and morality in public life. And Cameron would not have said anything. I mean, he didn't say anything even in March when the Financial Times began to ask particular factual questions. So, if we take the victim, that is the whole government and the society, victim of or victims of Cameron's kind of theft, big theft act, and robbery and the smashing of the, even though it is unwritten, smashing of the British Constitution. Because Cameron should not be featured at all in the kind of way that the Daily Mail has kind of pictured him in this 2-page spread. That's Cameron's picture in the Daily Mail. Just an idea. The word on the right is bank chief. Now remove the letter C and put a letter T there. And it says bank thief. Doesn't it? It's bank thief. So Cameron behaved as the head of parallel government in the style of the Mexican drug lords or the South American or Latin American drug cartels, heads of cartels. And the fact that Cameron is not being talked about as a potential criminal to be put on trial can be used or cited as evidence of the confidence that Cameron worked with. And all these things that have been coming out now, years later, would again reinforce the assumption, the observation, that Cameron behaved with impunity. And the fact that Cameron assumed that he had impunity is, of course, supported by the behavior of the prosecuting authorities. They have been silent. They have been completely silent about any crimes that Cameron has committed. Compare the 20 billion pounds he was demanding to be paid to Granville under the covers of COVID-19. How many people lost their lives during that year alone, 2020, who would still be alive had they got the necessary high quality, high standard medical care, which only explains the high standard, clinically high standard medical kind of care that was given to Boris Johnson when he publicly claimed to have been infected or whatever, a crime. The operation of the court system, anyone watching this and not familiar with the legal bureaucracy needs to check everything I'm saying, because everything I'm saying about the legal bureaucracy is based on evidence. And everything I will say will be based on absolute, objective definition of exhibition. So what they can check is whether what I'm saying leaves out anything, any omission that Cameron can be punished under. Direct message on the Twitter account, Khoodeelaar, as it is spelled on the account, and for example, the interview with Jeffrey Voss, the new master of the rolls, published this week by the Times, carries a piece summarizing that interview, I suppose, by containing some kind of quotes from this new person. And the interview is summarized in one page by the Times. By the Times' editor of the law section of the Law Times, or Times Law. The person is called Jonathan Ames, A-M-E-S. So the questions that arise from that, I mean, the Times didn't publish the pictures, but the Daily Mail did, of course. I mean, the picture of the people that have been bereft by the deaths of people that should have been alive. The pictures that the Daily Mail, for example, has published of the wife or would-be wife, the soon-to-be married to Jamal Khashoggi. Now, how many people familiar with the English court system agree that when it comes to litigation of the legal rights and access to legal quote services by people of African and Asian origin generally, and especially people of Muslim identities and coming from When Jamal Khashoggi was murdered, I think his murder was given a kind of extra high profile that included the fact that he was writing for the Washington Post. So Cameron doesn't look as if he is bothered about the remainder of the state. He thinks he is still the chief gangster running the corrupt gang UK PLC. So you could walk into effectively his texts and his phone calls to the finance ministry, to the Bank of England, to others. They were like him walking into the walking unannounced into these offices and demanding thug-like that the persons in posts did as he told them. This is a picture of Cameron yesterday. Now, when the secretive meetings of the big business and heads of governments take place without any minutes, allegedly, I mean, the questions those behavior raise is why are they not minuting the proceedings, and why are they holding the thing in secret? And the answer actually exposes the various borders between these states. Because had they been minuted, these minutes would have showed why the likes of Cameron could behave in the way that they do behave, and Cameron has been caught behaving. Okay, publishing minutes in itself doesn't constitute action and not the same thing as the action. But publishing minutes would have shown significant insights into the minds of the world's governments and big business, about the many, about the ordinary people, about societies, about what they are planning. For example, if the minutes were there, then we could definitely or definitively be able to say whether they had warnings about the COVID-19. But since they don't publish the records and there are no known media allowed, we don't know whether they knew about the pandemic or whether they plotted the pandemic. And if they plotted the pandemic, why did they plot the pandemic? We shall talk about Jeffrey Vox and the court system and the corruption of the councils like Tower Hamlets in the next part, but we should talk about also the fact that Lutfur Rahman has been allowed to remain unprosecuted. So this is coming to an end, this part, at 16:44 hours GMT. That is 4:44 p.m. in London on Friday, the 23rd of April 2021.